Hi, this is Debonee Morgan, and you're listening to The Spirit of Now Zeitgeist podcast, where we talk to spiritual teachers, wisdom holders, and influencers to broaden and deepen our spiritual lives. And today we're talking to Rabbi Mitch Cohen because we have an upcoming silent retreat. So we want to learn more about that. So let me welcome you, Rabbi Mitch Cohen. Obviously, this is not our first conversation. It's lovely to see you again and talk to you again. And for our audience, Rabbi Cohen is not only a spiritual leader in his original tradition of Judaism, but he is also a more perennial teacher in other traditions. So Mitch is certified in teaching and working with the Enneagram, as well as internal family systems, which he does with spiritual directees. He is a certified spiritual director, as well as a rabbi. And when it comes to silence, Mitch is familiar with this. He's done 5 of his own week-long silent retreats, and he has also led retreats for others, as he is going to do again for us this November. So Mitch, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And I want to start our conversation with the wonderful quote, and this is from our contemplative in residence, Carl McColman. This is from his book, The Mystical Path to a Joy, or Eternal Heart, The Mystical Path to a Joyful Life. And in the second chapter, he has an entire chapter on silence. And he says, times of rest, times of retreat, times of pause matter. They are opportunities for us to discover or rediscover that the threshold into silence, into the imaginal realm, is within us. So let's just start by talking about silence and why is silence important?
So let me first talk a little bit about an experience that I had, which was really the first time I had a profound experience of what happens during an extended period of silence. So I'll preface that by I started meditating in 1991. Read a book by Herbert Benson, The Relaxation Response, because I was deep in the throes of a generalized anxiety period. After my third son was born, I was sort of freaking out how I do this. And a psychologist friend recommended that book, and so I started, 5 minutes of deep breathing, focusing on a just calm peace, breathing in calm, breathing out peace. And, I'd get to these nice calm periods. And then I go on with my day, still stuck in my anxiety. But it was in the late 90s. So this is what, let's say 9 years later, when I enrolled in the 3-year life coaching program that I trained in. The teacher, his name was Mike Smith, who unfortunately is no longer with us, but he gave us an exercise during one of our weekend intensives to walk around the area for 3 hours, and we couldn't say a word to anybody, and we were supposed to just notice what was going on around us as we walked. And when thoughts came in, and it was brilliant, he said, for the first 20 minutes, you're going to think this is stupid. You're going to think this is crazy. You're going to want to smile and say hello to people. Just don't. Just look straight and walk by them. And it was the first time that I ever noticed the sound of the birds.
Wow.
I mean, I grew up in in New York City, but then my formative years in rural New Jersey, plenty of birds around. And I can't recall a single time that I actually sat there and just listened to all the different bird calls. So this was in Florida. It was in West Palm Beach, and I was walking around. It was in a neighborhood, and heard all these bird calls, and the colors of the plants, the vividness of the green, the reds and the yellows, oranges of the flowers. It was so bright, and I never realized that that's what could happen during extended periods of silence, where the whatever it is, 40,000 thoughts per day,
Right.
just really start to slow down. And then when you get into a contemplative place where you're giving your mind something to focus on, whether it's the breath or a mantra, or to Carl's teaching, a biblical phrase that has spiritual meaning to you, then it gives the mind something to focus on, but frees up those all that other space occupied by all these thoughts. And then you become embodied. You notice your body. Most people don't even know what being embodied is.
Right.
And you really do get into a sense of calmness, and it's a respite, from the busyness that we all deal with. So that would be my response to the power of extended periods of silence.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of times one of the things I work with my psychotherapeutic clients is this idea that often we mistake our thoughts for ourselves, our sense of self, right? Um, and when you get that extended silence, it gives you the opportunity to actually look at the thoughts happening. And you have to realize that there's that Buddhist observer, right? That if you're watching your thoughts happen, what part of you is doing the watching, right? But
Yeah.
you don't learn that without intentionally putting yourself into that place of silence. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, I've taught 2 classes on the Gospel of Thomas. I love that book. It's Jesus, the Buddhist, or the Taoist. And one of the very first verses is, when you look within, you will find, and when you find, you will be disturbed.
Mhm.
And when you're disturbed, I forgot what the closing phrase is, but essentially, you will awaken.
Right.
And I love that because a lot of people are afraid of silence, I believe,
Yeah.
because they don't want to be with their thoughts, right? That's why in our culture, particularly the Western culture, we are just really, really good at numbing and distracting, right?
Mhm.
Whether that's through drugs, alcohol, yes, believe religion can be an addiction too.
Right.
Spiritual bypassing is a thing.
Oh, yeah.
So people don't want to be with their thoughts. I've heard people say that if I get quiet, I'm going to get even more anxious.
Mhm.
Well, that's the disturbing that Jesus was talking about. And it's
Right.
actually a needed disturbing, because these are the things we've been avoiding. So one of the things that will come up in extended silence, like they show up in dreams, because as my first 30 years was as a depth psychology informed life coach. And I did a lot of dream work. And the scariest dreams, the scariest nightmares are usually the most powerful gifts
Right.
if we're willing to look within. It's the same thing in silence. Stuff will come up, but it's that disturbance that needs to be heard.
Yeah. So when people want to enter into this, for example, if they were going to come to our retreat, what you can expect is to be uncomfortable at some
But
point,
at
not
some point,
permanently, but at some point.
but now, I mean, I'm not talking about like people having to get up and run out of the room. I mean, I did the 5 week-long retreats with Adyashanti with 200 of my closest personal friends, and occasionally there were tears in the room, stuff was coming up, but that's okay. That's actually a
Right.
gift because it ends up being a release, and it doesn't cost $150 to be in a therapist office and release it there, though it's great to be witnessed
Yeah.
in releasing our pain. Um, so, it's really powerful. And my experience is the first day or so, you're just kind of getting used to it. It's not uncommon for people that are new to meditation, when they're in a formal program, usually a couple hours in to go, what the hell did I do this for? Like, where's the door? It's not uncommon,
Right.
but it passes, and then things can move on from there.
Mhm.
It's also why I think it's really important for multi-days. My experience personally is it's really day 3 that you really get settled in and you get to that place. And it was my experience both out in Mount Madonna, California, and then up in North Carolina, of course, now Space at Canoga, I think it is, the Episcopal Retreat Center up in North Carolina. Same experience. About day 3, during breaks between meditative sessions, you can walk around and just to experience nature the way you don't normally do it when you've been silent for a couple of days is just such a spiritual experience.
Yeah. So let me go back and ask you to talk a little bit more about if somebody has not done this before. Maybe they don't even have a lot of experience with meditation or their own silence, but they're intrigued. Is this an okay place for them? Is this a welcoming place to be introduced to that level of silence?
Absolutely. For several reasons. Number one, if they've never meditated before, they can reach out to me directly. There's a very simple little, and I mentioned it earlier, the Herbert Benson way, and he did a lot of research on transcendental meditation, is you just sit for 5 minutes, breathe in deeply and say the word calm silently to yourself. And when you breathe out, you say peace. Calm, breath in, peace, breath out. And when your thoughts wander, all you do is say to yourself, thoughts, and then bring it back to your word, calm and peace. It's literally that simple. And, for some people, they'll come for the first time. And, we're talking about the structure of the day will be 4 meditation sessions for 40 minutes. So that means for meditators, they'll meditate for 40 minutes. For people that are new to meditation, maybe they meditate for 5 minutes and then they just sit there for the rest of the time and just, be with the energy of the group, which is, another powerful thing. During breaks, and there'll be 20-minute breaks between sessions and a long break twice during the day to walk the grounds of Ignatius House, which is beautiful. I mean, it's right on the Chattahoochee River. It's wooded all around. There's hiking trails. There's places to sit all along behind. The chapel there is all glass. So you can literally sit in the chapel and just sit there and look out. And it's not a mandatory, like if somebody just doesn't want to come back to a session, they don't have to. In other words,
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, if they're out hiking around and it's the afternoon and they're like, I don't feel like going back for that 2:30 meditation session. Fine.
Yeah.
You'll get what you need in your own silent way, because we do have to stay silent on the grounds. There'll be other people there in silent retreat.
Okay, it's good
So
to
we
know.
do have to, and this includes meals. So we'll be in total silence. However, in the evenings, we've got guest speakers coming. And that is a time when we can ask questions. So there will be time in the evenings for us to actually speak up.
Tell me a little bit more about that. Who do we have coming and what's that going to look like?
So our own Pam Muller, who is a dream work expert. If you're interested in her work, she's got a TikTok page and she's very good with social media, has a book out, and she will come speak to us about dream content that comes out, because it's not uncommon during silent periods or extended silence to have stuff come up in dreams. And she'll teach us a little bit about what to do about that. And then a good friend of mine who's a depth psychology psychotherapist is going to come, and he's going to speak to us about, should anything come up during meditation, what to do about that, how to process through that, how to be with that. It's a great paradox of Jesus's mentions of disturbance, right? This is a time not to numb out, not to avoid it, not to spiritually bypass it, but to embrace it. and invite it and say, again, I'm going to put my IFS hat on that, right?
Right.
Tell me more about what you need to share. You know, what do you need to let me know? And I use the word self with a big S, and that's the same Jungian word. You know, that's the self core. That's what Father, Richard Rohr calls the divine center, the God within, the Holy Spirit within. That's the self with a big S. Carl Jung called it the self with a big S. The Enneagram folks call it the self with a big S. And of course, internal family systems, the whole practice is built around getting yourself into self energy,
Mm-hmm.
which is always a place of compassion, curiosity, connectedness, calmness, um, so that we can actually listen with compassion, listen with confidence, to the stuff, the parts that come up during silence that just needs to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
That's the beauty. So basically, an extended meditation period is also a self therapy sort of period. Doesn't mean a bunch of horrible trauma is going to come up, though it could, but it means things you've been sitting on for a while may pop up. And this is an opportunity to actually ask it to join you at the table and share what it needs to share.
It's a lovely way to put that, right? It's like creating space for your egoic self, your everyday
Exactly.
self, that we all want to feel important. We all want to feel liked. We want to feel like we're smart and that we fit in. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But the beautiful thing is when you're sitting in silence, like none of those needs are going to get met. And then who are you underneath all of those needs, right? Where is that capital S self
Yeah.
when you stop any kind of activity that's going to be gratifying in any other way
Yeah,
than sitting with
it's
the
so
self.
funny. It's so funny that you bring that example up, right? All of that egoic, the persona stuff that we need. It's important. We got to have
Yeah.
an ego, right? That's what gets us up in the morning. Um, but I'm an Enneagram type 2. That's the caregiver, the giver, and I'm really driven to be validated and appreciated. I'm very relational. Well, I'm on a daily email listserv from the Enneagram Institute, and today's teaching was try not to connect with anybody today and just be with yourself. It's perfect. You just said that.
Yeah.
So it's true. For those of us that really need that connection, that really relational, for these several days, you're on your own. Now you're in community,
Right.
right? But you're not communicating with that community in
Right.
a physical or verbal way.
Right.
Now you are communicating, right? Because their self energy is in the room too. All right. And they're accessing it just like you are. And that's the energy that connects all of us.
Right.
I had
Yeah,
an experience. Oh, I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. No, you go ahead. Sorry.
I had an experience of this last night. I usually teach this, when I tell people we have self energy, they go, what is this self energy? I said, you've been sitting on a MARTA train, right? And you're really engulfed in a book. You're just into it. And you look up and wait to your left, and somebody's been looking at you, right? They may be thinking, oh, that looks like my brother, or that looks like my cousin, or they may think you're attractive, whatever it is. There's no way you could have seen that, right? You were so engulfed in that book. What you were doing is picking up their energy. And it
Yeah.
happens all the time. Last night, Hannah was sleeping, and I went out to get a book or something, and I went back in, and I just stopped for a second to just look at her, just admire her. And she opened her eyes. I said, oh my God, how did you? And then I realized, you were picking up my energy,
Yeah.
right? Somehow she wasn't totally asleep, but in that half sleep state, she was picking up my energy.
Yeah.
So it's the beauty of meditation in community.
Yeah, that's what I was about to introduce is, you'd mentioned earlier the energy of the group, that if somebody is new and they may not be able to hold that meditative stance for a 40-minute times period, but they're still there, they're still honoring silence, and they're still within the group. And you mentioned the energy of the group. So obviously you just talked about that, but is there a way to expand on that some more? Like, what are the benefits to spending these several days in a community of other people if we're not constantly chatting? What are we getting out of that, being in the group?
Right. So there will be a group connection and a synergy of energy. And what can also happen, and I forgot which of the retreats I went to. Ironically, the last Adyashanti 5-day retreat, I flew back to Atlanta on March 1st, 2020, a week before everything shut down.
That's right.
If that had been, 10 days later, I would have been stuck in San Francisco, which is not a bad place to be stuck in, but it would have been stuck out there. But this woman was sitting next to me, older woman, older, well, I'm not a young guy, but older than I am. And she was sitting there. And at the end of the whole thing, she came over and said, the other day when I was sitting in the seat next to you, you have a lot of real good healing energy. And I'm like, what are you talking about? There are some people that are highly intuitive and really can pick up, energies of people for the better or the worst. And, I was honored and humbled by that acknowledgement. But that was the first time I really realized that not only is there an aspect of the energy of the room and you're amongst this, but you literally could impact the person sitting on either side of you. And they can impact you. So in other words, if something comes up and it is a little challenging, then the energy of the person to your left or right could actually support you processing through that.
The sense of being held together in the silence.
Yeah, there's a whole energy level to our being and presence that we are so unaware of. The people in the East, they get it. The indigenous people, they get it. Those of us in the developed Western world are blind to it, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole other conversation, right? Like, how did that come about? I'm sure we both have some good theories on that one.
Well, it's the same thing, why do people go to houses of worship, right? Because the truth is, you can sit anywhere you are sitting is a place of worship, right? But people get something from it, and I consistently hear people like, "Why do you go?" And I hear, when I led a congregation, right? Why do you go? The prayers are rote. Some of them are boring. Many of us don't believe anything that's in the content. And they said it's for the community. And I knew what they were actually saying. It was the energy of the room, where everybody in the room, if it was a Shabbat service, were together and welcoming in a 25-hour period of slowing down, of rest. Which, in the Jewish tradition, even me being way on the progressive end theologically, it still meant a slowing down. It was not a work day, and to enter into that, with 35 or 40 other people is a pretty powerful experience.
Yeah, I mean, say more about the analogy between what you'll be hosting coming up and Shabbat.
Well, that's a great question. So Shabbat is anything we want it to be, right? It's just a period, and for those, that's Sabbath. Shabbat is the Hebrew for that. So we're basically looking at this as a 4-day Shabbat experience. It's going to start Wednesday evening, 16th, and there'll be full days on the 17th, 18th, and 19th, and then we end at brunch time on that Sunday. So it'll be, an evening, starting like Shabbat does, right, with a sunset, but an evening, and then 3 full days, and then ending at brunch. So look at that as your own personal Shabbat in community, on spiritual grounds, right? Ignatius House, if you haven't been there, very, very powerful spiritual place.
Yes.
There have been thousands of people that have walk those grounds that have brought the whatever pain they were coming in for whatever reason they were at their retreats, which were always more, Catholic oriented, whether they were meeting with their spiritual directors there, whether they were just getting away from it all. It doesn't matter what, but people came with hearts full, and that energy sticks around.
Yeah, yeah. I've pretty much been focusing on silence, but you just said an important word that I think is relevant for the retreat as well, and that is rest.
Yes.
Can you say a little bit more about rest and silence and how they work together?
Yeah, we always, talk different analogies of, we got to recharge the batteries, right? But there is something about slowing the brain down. When I was in my coaching training, there was a metaphor that we used, and that is, we called it efforting, right? When you start something new, let's say the mind only has 10 units to do all that the mind does, right? In a normal day, 2 of them are occupied by, the have tos, getting up, getting ready for work, doing all that stuff. But then there's 8 available for dealing with whatever type of work we do, relating to people we're in relationship with, so on and so forth. When we start something new, it's the reverse, right? There's 8 units of the mind occupied with just trying to get the thing off the ground, which is why new projects are so challenging, so mentally taxing, so tiring, because we're exerting a ton of effort, right? So when you go to something like this, or even if it's a Shabbat where you're not working and you're really doing things that feed the soul, you're freeing up 8 units. So that, you just have the 2 units that are dealing with body function and, everything else. But now you have 8 units that are literally not doing anything. Right. So they're going to come into the room and, we're going to do a short 30-minute session, go to silent breakfast. And then there's I think we have 2 hours of free time after breakfast, just to walk the grounds. Some people bring books. Some silent retreats don't allow reading, but I do. So you can bring, hopefully not novels, but, something that's spiritually nurturing, to bring that with you, to bring a journal if you're into journaling, or to just walk the grounds. It'll be chilly, but, bring a jacket. Nobody had any trouble in 2019 when we did at the same time of year. Or just sit on a bench and listen to the birds like I did, in 1999 or whenever that was. So that will certainly recharge the system, right? I remember on a World Pilgrims trip, we went to the Grand Canyon and we spent 3 days there. And it was an 8-day trip, but 3 days were just the Grand Canyon. And I remember one of the, whatever you call them, the not the guards, but the park rangers, that's it.
Right.
He came over to us and he said, do you know what the average stay of an American who visits the Grand Canyon? And we said, a day? They said, hour and a half.
What?
He said, people come and they park their car in the South Rim and they walk out and they look over into the canyon. They get all the oohs and ahs, take photographs, and then they leave. That's the average. He said, you guys are taking 3 days here, right? You're experiencing, the area. Some of us hiked down. There's one trail that's not that difficult. Some of us, including myself, just went down an hour, turned around and came back. Some people just sat out. There's a couple of viewing areas where you can sit and just look out, but we took it in and, listened to another park ranger just give us the history, an hour lecture. Native Americans believe that they were born in that canyon and came out of it. Most Americans don't know that, but we spent time there, right? So same thing with this. We're going to be spending 3 whole days where people can really start to slow it down. And it's not uncommon for the first day to just still, the wheels are still turning. I've heard people say, none of the 4 sessions could I stop the thinking. Terrific.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Gareth Young's a friend of mine. He also leads the Red Clay Sangha, a Zen Sangha here in Atlanta. And we met for breakfast one time. And I said, Carl, I had such a bad meditation this morning. He said, tell me more. I said, I couldn't slow my thinking. I was just so wrapped around the axle. He said, did you sit the whole time? I said, yeah, 30 minutes. He said, well, how is that a bad meditation?
Yeah.
He said, you sat for 30 minutes. There's no good and there's no bad. You sat for 30 minutes.
You win.
Right. I never forgot that. Just the act of sitting for 30 minutes to a Zen Buddhist is enough.
Yeah.
But we in our culture, particularly American culture, we rate our meditation.
Oh, yeah.
It's a good meditation. No, there's no such thing as a good meditation or a bad meditation.
Right. Or right or wrong, right? A lot of people are like, oh, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it right.
Yeah. I mean, just yesterday, I've been meditating for 31 years, right? 30 minutes, usually just 5 days a week. Yesterday, I thought most of the time after 31 years, but I sat for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. And I breathed deep for 30 minutes. Right. And occasionally the thoughts would slow down and, there's just a lot going on. So they just kept on coming back. So I take Gareth's good teaching to me, you sat for 30 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. And you were aware of the thoughts. You were in a state of awareness rather than living inside the thoughts. The thoughts were just something that was inside you.
Just yesterday, they just wouldn't step back, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And so the first day for newer people, even for older meditators, even when I've gone out to California, I know the first day I expect it to just be a nice day. It's really the second day when I would start to kind of settle in. And I'd really strongly encourage people to turn off their phones, or only, check in the evening and only respond to family emergencies. I mean, literally, I tell people I'm going to be away for the next 4 days with no cell phone and no email. So, and I do that 2 weeks before I go. So I change my signature block in my email, from this date to that date, I will be gone, on vacation, with no access to cell phone or email.
Yeah.
That should really limit it to just junk, which you don't need to do anything about, or emergencies, God forbid.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm sure that's a frightening possibility for some people, not the emergencies, but just the idea of not being on the phone constantly.
I am Mitch Cohen. I am a phone addict. And yeah, I put it down. No news, which is a gift in and of itself.
Right.
Right. No Facebook, no TikTok, just my mind. And that anxiety that comes up of, wow, I just want to grab my phone. I get really curious about that. I ask the question, what am I avoiding? Like, why do I need the dopamine rush by picking up the phone? And again, that's not judgmental. If there's judgment in there, I ask that part to just settle back. Just let me deal with what's really causing the anxiety. What's up? That I'm literally like an addiction, running for a numbing or a distraction by going to the phone.
Yeah.
Usually it doesn't take long for that part to speak up.
Yeah. So this just sounds like such a rich opportunity for folks. It's a time for rest. It's a time for disconnecting from the things that keep you running on the treadmill.
Mm-hmm.
It's a time for restorative silence. It's a time for maybe a little bit of challenge, depending on what comes up, which creates a growth opportunity. There will be experts and coaches and, you know, the guidance of yourself and the wonderful, wonderful time with, you didn't name your psychologist friend.
Oh, Stuart Smith.
With Stuart, right? So we'll
Yeah.
have time with Stuart, we'll have time with Pam to talk about dreams, to talk about the psychology of this process, time to yourself, time to walk the gorgeous, gorgeous grounds, maybe some time to read or journal, and
Mhm.
then time to be in the stillness. So it sounds very juicy. It sounds lovely.
Oh, what one important thing I forgot
What's
is,
that?
there's 3 nights, right? So, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night. My thought is, Saturday night, I would facilitate just a Q&A.
Lovely.
Instead of a teaching, like, Pam is going to talk about dream work and Stuart's going to talk about stuff that might come up. I'm going to facilitate just Q&A. You know, did things come up, or what's going on? How can you see this being a benefit leaving here? Any question that anyone has,
Right.
that will be, and if it's a spiritual question, more the better.
Yeah, yeah. And is it okay for people to ask personal questions based on their experience or based on what they'd like to learn at wherever they're at this week,
Uh,
you know?
Not even about the meditation. I mean, they can bring anything they want to that Q&A.
That's
It's
lovely.
purely confidential. Anything that is said in the room stays in the room. And I will put on my life coach, my rabbi, and my spiritual director's hat.
Perfect.
So you got 3 levels of confidentiality.
I love it. I love it. So yeah, we'll put some of those references. We'll direct people to Stuart and to Pam and all of that in the show notes. So the dates of this, correct me if I'm wrong, Mitch, I'm thinking we are looking at November 16th through the 20th. Does that sound right?
It does. I'm going to
20,
just verify.
22, in case you happen to fall upon this podcast afterwards, check with us. We'll probably do another one in the future. But a Wednesday through Sunday. And all of the registration information is on our website, zgatl.org, for Zeitgeist. So Mitch, anything else you'd like to add as we close up?
Yeah, just again, if somebody is interested, has never done this, or wants to learn the basics of meditation, reach out. And that information is available on the Zeitgeist Atlanta website.
Perfect. And we'll also put, Mitch, we'll also put your website in case anyone would like to reach out to become a directee with you, and to have a professional relationship with you as a coach or a directee. So that sounds wonderful. Thanks again, Mitch. I'm really looking forward to this. It's an exciting opportunity for folks to have some spiritual growth. So I appreciate it.
I look forward to it too. It's going to be a gift to all of us.
Thanks.